My name is Merrill Dubrow, CEO of Mark Research. I'm a 35-year veteran of the research and insights community and the host of our podcast, On the Mark. On the Mark is focusing on executives and thought leaders in the world, sharing their insights, strategies, and personal experiences. I promise this podcast will be filled with tough, pointed questions with real, insightful, and emotional answers. Today's guest is Jay Hawreluk, CEO of AcuMax Index. Jay, welcome to the On the Mark podcast.
Pleased to be here, Merrill.
All right. Jay, we're going to get right into it. We're going to mix it up, okay? So here's the deal. You're CEO of the AcuMax Index. You've been doing it for 8.5 years. Unfortunately, let's assume some of our listeners just don't know what the AcuMax Index is. Can you give me a 30-second commercial on that?
I sure can. The AcuMax Index is the only assessment that measures and reports on human wiring. There's a huge difference between human wiring and personality or behavior. There are 240 personality/behavior instruments in the marketplace. But personality and behavior changes over time due to nurture, which are external elements, upbringing, education, age, and maturity. Like my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, Jay, the older you get, the smarter I'll become. That changes behavior. Wiring is static. It occurs at the 18 to 24-month period after a person is born and is formed by specific chemicals that create neural pathways in the brain. These never change. It gives you a deeper insight into the individual.
Wow, that's interesting. So one of the takeaways for me is, and we've heard this all along, Jay, leaders are born, right? There's a lot of folks that are 18 months still not even talking, and you're saying the wiring is already taking place. It's formed. So our leaders are really born based on what you're saying.
Well, it depends on the type of leader that you want. I think the better analogy is leaders placed in the correct environment were born to be in that environment.
Okay. Can you expand on that? I just want to make sure I get that.
Well, for example, certain wiring patterns are very good at creating change, forcing growth in organizations. Some are better in a manufacturing world or a data-driven world. Others are better in a people or a human world. So based on your wiring, it determines, number one, the environment you best thrive within, and then secondarily, the type of leader that you will be. Sometimes we need a very forceful leader. Sometimes we need a more compassionate and understanding leader. So it really depends on the industry, the type of involvement, and then, of course, the intellectual ability and ambitions of the person. There is no good assessment, truly, that measures ambition, because there's nothing that measures the 10 years of hard work you had to put in to become an overnight sensation.
You know, it's interesting, and you and I have spoken probably over the last 3 years a gazillion times because I find this stuff fascinating. But when you just gave me that example, something popped in my head that I'm wondering, you know, if there's a company out there that is struggling and the board of directors comes to you and says, hey, Jay, here's what's going on with this company. We're struggling because of this. You almost could paint the picture, say, okay, you need high A, low C, you know, high D or something like that, right? I mean, you always could paint the picture and say, this is the exact guy or woman that you need for this particular position, right? I mean, am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely correct, because some organizations need a growth-oriented leader. Some organizations really are to the point where they need more of a maintenance leader. It's not good or bad, it's just what the need is. The problem is, if you put a maintenance leader in a growth situation, the board's going to be unhappy. If you put a growth leader into a maintenance situation, the leader's going to be unhappy. And it's going to create issues within the team and the organization. So based upon a lot of times the stage of the company and the requirements, we can tell you what wiring you're going to need for that role.
Well, let me ask you a question. So let's say I had a startup company, right? And I get to, I don't know, $10 million within the first 2 or 3 years. And I'm the right leader for that, right? Then the growth might go to maintenance based on what the board's strategy is. in a lot of ways, I might not be that right guy. I mean, is it possible that you could be both or not at all? Are you really one or the other?
Well, this is a very complicated question. I think number one, self-awareness of the leader helps in adapting and changing as the organization grows and matures. So a very growth-oriented leader who understands, hey, that's how I am, but I'm going to be better taking my talents into growing the team and creating the second generation of leaderships as opposed to continually pushing for growth. That's an evolved way of looking at the leader. Oftentimes leaders, they get a company to a certain point and they don't change their strategy, or they're not self-aware to who they are, and that's what creates issues. And where many times the person who started the company, the CEO, the brilliant CEO, ends up finding themselves gone because the board says, wait, things have changed. We've seen that. We've seen that happen in many, many organizations.
So does your tool and can your consulting practice help a CEO navigate through that? Because, I mean, obviously, look, CEOs start a company, they build it up, they get to that $10 million threshold, whatever the threshold is, and before they're asked to go play in somebody else's sandbox by the board, can you help them and navigate through that so that doesn't happen?
Absolutely, because everybody has innate strengths and everybody has innate limitations. When you understand your limitations and you can use a strength to offset that. So going back to our pushing and CEO wanting to push for growth of the organization, well, maybe that's getting mature or, that we're doing very, very well. We'll take those talents, modify them a little bit to help groom individuals that are better suited to take it to the next level of leadership or the next generation of leadership. But oftentimes people say, well, what got me here is what I got to keep doing. And sometimes that fails.
Since we've not rehearsed anything I'm about to ask, I'm going to get risky here, and I'm going to give you a chance to take some shots at me. You know I've taken the AcuMax Index. We've reviewed it together. You've probably reviewed it individually. So why don't you talk for a minute about maybe a few of my strengths, and then we'll get into, are you ready for this? What are some of the areas of improvement that I need to make? And this is public. Probably a little dangerous, but let's go for it.
Do we have enough time to cover all the areas of improvement?
Yeah, that's a that's a good point. Probably not. That may be 2 or 3 more episodes.
Well, here's your innate strengths. You push through adversity. You will not take no for an answer. You're a big picture decision maker. You operate well in ambiguity. You have a great sense of urgency to get things done. You will use your communication style. You can be very authoritative and direct when you need to be, but you can also be very persuasive when you need to be. And that's a great combination to really push and grow an organization forward. Now, with that said, sometimes because you like to force through adversity, a leader such as yourself, the organization's going well, things are going great, we're making money, we're hitting our targets. I'm not saying this is you, but it can happen with your kind of wiring. I need a personal challenge, so I'm going to go break some stuff so I have things to fix. By your nature, you're impatient for results. And that can be a strong thing in growing the organization. But if you're too impatient as the organization is moving along well, it can sometimes create some chaos and disruption within the organization. So I was just kidding about the long story for the limitations.
Well, no. I mean, so what type of CEO would you stereotype me in? What box would I fit in?
You're the very growth-oriented, move the company forward, move straight ahead, let's increase revenues. With part of your wiring pattern, part of the residual of you, and it's everyone that has your kind of wiring pattern kind of suffers from, is things are never really good enough. Well, what do I mean by that? You set your target, I'm going to increase revenues by 20%. And your company increases revenues by 30%. A residual part of you is happy. Yeah, we got the goal. But the other part of you is thinking, you know what? If we'd worked a little bit harder, we could have got to 35 or 40. That's just a resultant effect of your wiring. And that's you.
Yeah, it's interesting as you, I have a Fitbit on my right wrist. I'm the type of guy who's, I know that I did 7,111,209 steps in 2019, and I know I want to do +1 this year. So anything less than that will be very disappointing to me. So it's funny that you categorize me, frankly, correctly. Interesting. Very, very interesting. What is there a blind spot that most CEOs have, Jay? I mean, obviously, self-awareness, in my opinion, is the single most important skill that you can have as a CEO and actually as anybody in the business world. But is there any blind spots that are consistent across the board for CEOs?
No, absolutely, yes. And the biggest blind spot is the CEO thinks that the rest of the team and the organization are wired like them, and they're not. Look at wiring is like this. It's the environment you thrive within, but it's also how you see the world. So you're a big picture decision maker. And oftentimes you expect as a CEO that everybody on the team sees the same world you do, and they don't.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But there's this inner struggle that's going on. So if I heard you correctly, you're like, hey, Merrill, you can be right. You got strong convictions. You want to move things forward. You're impatient, and some of the team members, you may have to wait to play catch up, right? But that's my impatience kind of can get in the way of that, right?
Well, sometimes, but since you know that, then the thing is you're able to step back and say, you know what? If I'm too impatient or put too much pressure on the team, Merrill, could actually slow them down. So by knowing the wiring of the team you're dealing with, it gives you the data to be able to sit back and say, yeah, I'd like to get this initiative out the door in 2 weeks, but with this team, they're going to function better and do a better quality product in 4 weeks, because that's what they said they can do. So you can sit back and say, as long as it hits timetables, hits your client's timetable and requests, then you can kind of sit back and say, I know that if I step back, this team is going to perform better, and I'm going to get a higher quality project out of them. That's the beauty of understanding not only you, but the wiring of your team.
Wow, that is impressive. All right, we're getting this away from me. You've beat me up enough. We're going to go back to you, all right? So I want you to think about Jay from 20 years ago and Jay today. How have you grown as a leader? How have you changed over that span of time?
Well, I actually practice what I preach, and I think that's been very helpful because, Merrill, I'm wired very similarly to you. And so, number one, I understand that not every member of my team sees what I do. So understanding their wiring, I communicate to them on their wiring so they get the message right the first time. Secondarily, I've been able to grow as a leader by understanding how to collaborate better. And one of the things I say in my organization is to every person, you will always be heard. Your ideas will always be entertained. Now, you may not always get them, but no, you'll always be heard. And I probably wasn't like that 20 years ago. I was more heads down, charge ahead, go forward. You're either with me or you're going to left in the wake. So that I think that's really helped me as a leader, and that's been the value of this. Is I actually take the consulting I give to other people. It's been hugely beneficial.
Yeah. So recently, I know that you wrote an article, How to Develop Strong Teams. I think it was published maybe a week ago or something like that, right? Not too long ago. Any best practices, anything you can share? Because a lot of the listeners, Jay, you obviously met at the CEO Summit. They're from the CEO Summit. They're business executives in the insights community, in the business world. Everybody is trying to develop strong teams. And I know you just had a point of view. Can you share that with the listeners?
Well, the key, if you have a team all wired the same way, we all like doing the same things. So oftentimes, things can fall through the cracks. Maybe projects don't get done. Maybe plans aren't followed. To have an effective team, you need a diversity of wiring. But a diversity of wiring is what creates dysfunction within the team unless you know the value they bring. That's the beauty of it. So You and I, we're big picture individuals. We need people wired opposite of us that are going to implement those projects, see that they become successful, because part of our wiring is as soon as we start the first initiative, well, we're on to the next one, So, but you need people to see things through. So just understanding the value that the people bring to the team. Who is going to be a positive in a team? Who could be a distraction in a team? So that gives you that. Now, it's data. It gives you the best thing I like to say is it gives you data on people to make good, analytical, objective decisions that not only move the company forward, but actually satisfy the employee and help make them more engaged.
Right. So let me ask you, because one could say, hey, look, if I've got somebody who's got tremendous conflict on the team, we'll just have them play somewhere else. You're not saying that. You're saying understand them, understand their wiring, understand how they can be an effective leader, understand how they like to communicate, integrate within the company, their thought process. You're saying work with them and understand a lot more than just take the easy path and, okay, go play somewhere else.
Well, absolutely, and part of it is understanding them. Part of them is them understanding them understanding the other members of the team. And oftentimes the best selling point to get an executive to buy in is, do you want your results faster? Do you want this team to operate more productively? Then appeal to their wiring. And that's just great insight and great knowledge. And so you may understand the person that you looked at 2 months ago and you thought, oh, man, they're dragging our team down. Actually, that could be the person that if I communicate with them and maybe put them in the role they're best suited for, will push the team forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're talking in beginning of 2021, and I say, hey, Jay, how you doing? You say, great. How was 2020? And you say, we had a great year. What are some of the things that happened in 2020 to make it a great year?
Number one, our client base is really exploding, and we're seeing this at the beginning of this year. More and more companies are embracing it because it's an easy system, gives you fast data, and good decisions on human capital. Number two, to be able to drive our programs into organizations to help them solve other issues. That is what's going to be a great year. As companies help their employees become more successful, hire better, it breeds to our success. And so that's what, looking back at 2020, saying those programs are working, more clients are using us, they're getting great results. That's what's going to make for a great 2020. And we're on our way.
That's great. Well, I know that, listen, we've used the tool here at Mark Research for a few years. You've helped us with filling some positions, really narrowing down the candidates. Nobody gets interviewed here without taking the AcuMax Index, so allowing us to get from 20 candidates down to 3 or 4. You've made that very, very easy. Also, our turnover has been gone in a much better direction. We're in beyond single digits, which is fantastic. Also, we use the tool with some of our biggest clients right now to see when we put somebody on the team, will they fit in? How will they communicate? How do they integrate with that client prior? And not to mention, also, we use it when we transfer somebody from one manager to another. We run a comparison survey and it helps. Is there any other ways that you could share that could help any of the listeners out there if they were looking into your system?
Well, number one, we are company specific. We take data within your organization for the wiring pattern of the employees that you need. We don't use templates because what Mark might need, some other company that's very similar in the same type of work may need something different. So that's number one. Number two, I think, Meryl, you did say it best. This saves you time and money because it's so efficient. You're not interviewing people that aren't a fit for the role. You want to look at background, you want to look at skill set, but with a 5-minute assessment, I know this person's natural orientation to ideas, how they communicate, not talk or think, but process thought, how quickly they make decisions, accept pressure, how much information they need for decisions, and where they get their self-confidence and how they best learn. That's valuable information. One client said, The best use of this is it cuts down the 90-day feel-out period. When you have somebody in front of you and they start working for you, you know an awful lot about them on day one.
Yeah, that's well said. Jay, thanks again. You've been listening to Jay Hawreluk, CEO of AcuMax Index on the Mark podcast. Jay, fantastic information. Job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Merrill. Always a pleasure.